Heather, you work at the high school?
Yes, I'm an English teacher at Concord High School, and I often teach film study. I'm not right now, and media literacy. Yeah. And I'm a John Hughes fan.
One thing about this movie that I'll comment on immediately is that last bit of business there where you figure the movie is over and the credits are finished, and I think it's a nice touch to put something at the tail end of the credits. It certainly gives those people who struggled mightily to put this together, who more often than not don't get any physical credit as far as being in the movie is concerned, that you are, well, I don't want to use the word forced, that's too tough, but you are anticipating perhaps that something might be taking place at the end of the film that might be just the right touch to send you out of the auditorium with. And this is a perfect example of the main character coming back and saying, you know, you're still here, go home. Which I'm not too sure how many other directors or films I could probably name much before this that did that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's common now to go to a movie like The Avengers or Pirates of the Caribbean, I think, did it as well, and you stick around because you're like, is there going to be a hidden scene at the end of this? But I agree, I can't think of one really from before that.
Yeah. No, this I think was a little innovative. And the other touch that you may be interested in hearing is that the two actors that play the parents of Ferris Bueller, they were introduced to one another before the filming started, and as is the case, which should be, they wanted to make it seem as realistic as possible that here they are, a married couple with grown children, to make you feel that they were a married couple, so they hung out with one another, and lo and behold, they fell in love with one another in real life. And shortly after this was completed, I believe, they got married. The marriage didn't stick for eternity. Do any marriages stick for eternity today? I'm not too sure.
50%.
But from 1986 to 1982, Cindy Pickett and Lyman Ward were Mr. and Mrs. And they brought into the world two children. Which I think is, I don't know how unique that is. You usually hear about the stars perhaps forming some sort of liaison with one another because of the situations that they find themselves with within the production of a movie. But here are the co-stars falling in love. And the only other thing I'll mention, and then I'll let the ladies say something. Alan Ruck. The guy who plays Cameron in this movie, was 29 years old when this was shot. Wow. He definitely doesn't look 29. He and Matthew Broderick, I think, were appearing in a play on Broadway, and they knew one another quite sincerely and got along with one another nicely. And that was another bit of business that I think probably made Hughes interested in Alan Ruck as far as being the co-star here, was that indeed it came off as quite natural that these two guys were friends and had been friends for a long time. So, what have you got to add to this?
Well, there's a few things that, obviously on Tuesday, I don't know how many people were here on Tuesday, but just common things between 16 Candles and this. John Hughes seems to be a fan of ending it with a freeze frame. I know it wasn't like once you got past the credits and everything, but that last shot of Matthew Broderick in bed, freeze frame. Same thing in 16 Candles. I thought that was interesting. And another common thread that I read about is he also liked to integrate Beatles songs into his movies. They sing Twist and Shout on the parade float. And in 16 Candles, Anthony Michael Hall sings Birthday to Molly Ringwald. So I thought that was interesting, the parallels between the two, what he likes to do.
Apparently, when Hughes was a young man growing up in the Midwest, two of the strongest influences in his life were the Beatles and Bob Dylan. That's what I read. And of course, this is definitely music that's invading your life and making you feel that maybe there's hope that you can have a career in the entertainment business, which Hughes charted quite nicely for almost 20 years. Heather, I'll say the same thing that I said the other night. You apparently were so impressed with this movie that when you had a child, male variety, you named him
Cameron. When I first saw the movie, I missed it in the theater, and I saw it on VHS right after it came out on VHS. And the name Cameron in the 80s was not a popular, I know it is now, but I'd never met anybody named Cameron. So I said, oh, if I ever have a son, I'm going to name him Cameron. And many years later, that's exactly what I did.
Being in an arena, work-wise, where you're coming in contact with teenagers, how do you think they'd react to this?
They still love John Hughes movies. Yeah. FERRIS, we actually use the opening sequence of FERRIS in our film study class as part of a test where they have to name the different camera shots that are being used, and he uses pretty much everything that we teach in film study, and so we stop it and say, what angle is this? But they love The Breakfast Club, and they love FERRIS, I think, the most.
Yeah,
They're still relevant.
And that's a testament to Mr. Hughes, I think, in that considering that these movies were made in the 1980s, you flash forward 30 years, and they still have an appeal, and they still can maintain an interest with a similar age group quite solidly.
We use, in my media literacy class, we actually use The Breakfast Club to deconstruct stereotypes of teenagers, and John Hughes named them all, right in the end of that film. And so we look at movies today, and they still, for the most part, contain those same stereotypes that John Hughes was working to deconstruct in his movies.
Rebecca, you and I were talking about the fact that this movie may have been the last teenage-oriented movie that Hughes would make for a while.
He directed, at least.
Directed, yes.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I like to kind of read into things, so I don't know how accurate all of my analysis is, but if
it's
it is...
as good as anybody else.
It's good to me. I think it's the last teenage-based film that he directed, and throughout a lot of it, they're talking about moving on, taking the next step in life, graduating from high school. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know if it was conscious, he knew he didn't want to film another teenage movie. I know Barry and I discussed that briefly.
Yeah. It kind of, from what I've read, it kind of looked like Hughes didn't want to get pigeonholed as being just a maker of movies that were directed at a teenage audience. So the next film that he directed was Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which did not star teenagers. Mr. Steve Martin and Mr. John Candy being quite adult in age, and the storyline, I think it just focused around them. I don't think there was a teenager in sight, best of my knowledge.
Maybe when they got home for the holiday, finally, there was a teenager or two,
but not the focal point of the film, for sure. But some of the other things that may be of interest for you to hear. Initially, I think Emilio Estevez was being chartered to play the role of Cameron, and he decided not to do it. And much to Alan Ruck's joy, really. I read in a couple of accounts that Ruck will publicly acknowledge, thank you, Emilio, for not taking the job. It was probably one of the best things that Ruck did in his career. Speaking of Emilio Estevez, his brother Charlie Sheen shows up during the course of this movie, and the reason that he is in this film is probably to the credit of Jennifer Grey, who had just come off making a movie with Charlie Sheen called Red Dawn, the original version of that movie. And apparently was quite impressed with not only Sheen's looks, but with his acting ability, and suggested Sheen to Hughes, and Hughes picked up on it, and here's Charlie Sheen. Supposedly didn't go to sleep for 24 hours in order to look a bit wasted for the moment that he was on camera here. And I think it worked. He looked like he had been doing something that would put a little glassy nature to his eyeballs. The only other thing that is, I think, is kind of, and I don't know if you or Rebecca can offer anything. Hughes, after a point, he seemingly gets a little disenchanted with Hollywood, and decides to go back to his home base in the Midwest, and he's writing a lot of screenplays, but he's not using his name. He's using the name Edmond Dantes, which was a character in The Count of Monte Cristo, and I have yet to read in any format why he elected that particular name. I did look up the name and title character and protagonist of the Alexander Dumas adventure novel, The Count of Monte Cristo. Within the story's narrative, Dantes is an intelligent, honest, and loving man who turns bitter and vengeful after he is framed for a crime he didn't commit. When Dantes finds himself free and enormously wealthy, he takes it upon himself to reward those who helped him in his plight and punish those responsible for his years of suffering. I have no idea how, if there is any connection beyond maybe just drawing something from his youth that he appreciated. I don't know if there's any more context to it than that.
It's possible. I mean, you'd think if someone became more of a recluse, there's some sort of catalyst for that. So maybe there's things that we aren't aware of because he was private, but I would think you wouldn't do that unless there was a motivation. You know, so maybe he did feel somewhat betrayed by people.
As was discussed the other day, when a man by the name of John Candy, who did indeed appear very prominently in 5 films that John Hughes was associated with, when Candy died rather suddenly of a heart attack at age 43, it apparently upset Hughes sincerely, and probably the ironic part of that is if you flash forward a while and you find that indeed Hughes dies in a similar fashion of a heart attack at age 59 on the streets of New York in a summer day. He seemed to be able to summon up a great deal of appreciation from those that he came in contact with in this business. Watching a few documentary type inserts on these discs indicated to me that the people that he indeed employed as actors thought very highly of Hughes, not only as a director, but as a person to work with. He was not a difficult man to deal with as far as what you might hear stories of directors that are very demanding and perhaps even cruel in their attempt to elicit acting from their stars. It didn't seem like that was the case with John Hughes. Is there anything that you would like to ask us about that perhaps we can answer? And anybody, please. Did you enjoy this tonight? Is this a pleasant experience?
It always is.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, certainly appreciate you coming in here. Heather, Rebecca, anything you'd like to add to this?
It's a great movie.
No? And by all means, there are other films that Hughes was involved with. If you were looking at, well, he either wrote, for the most part, National Lampoon's Vacation, Christmas Vacation. What else here? A picture called Weird Science, Mr. Mom. An unusual one called, where's the one about the funeral? Only the Lonely. That was with John Candy. That had an odd background. Candy was working at a funeral parlor and was definitely not a happy individual. He had a hand in the version of Dennis the Menace that made it onto the movie theater screen, and the remake of the 1947 classic Miracle on 34th Street. I think there's a wealth of film that you might check out if indeed either one of these movies, 16 Candles or Ferris Bueller, has touched a nerve with you. Yes, sir.
Actually, she can go first. I'll go second.
I was going to add a couple of things. First, the other night, on Tuesday, we were talking about what might have happened with Molly Ringwald. So I dug into that a little bit and discovered that, best I can tell, she just wanted to move on before some kind of wonderful to more adult movies. So she and John Hughes had this falling out. But then they did reconcile, and she did become his friend again before he died. So it all ended well.
It was brought up the other night that Molly Ringwald was offered a part in a Hughes movie, Some Kind of Wonderful, and she refused to do the role.
But then the other thing that I wanted to share, because I saw her face and I thought, oh, this is so funny. I troll the internet a lot, including I was on LinkedIn the other day and I got into some film blog, some conversation where they were asking who's your favorite redheaded star. And somebody jumped in the conversation, and it was that Edie McClurg who plays the secretary. And she started advocating for herself to be everybody's redhead. And so everybody after that was saying, oh, no, it's Edie. But then I also like, Nicole Kidman or whatever. But Edie's the best. And they just kept it going. But I looked her up, and she's had a great comedy career. And she's still going. She's doing stand-up comedy and little roles in TV things and stuff.
Quite adept at improvisation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, she was funny in it.
Oh, she's a riot in this. I love her pulling the things out of her hair.
I'm just confused about it.
Yes, sir.
One thing I like about Hughes is that when he gets attached to certain actors, he tends to bring them back a lot. Because if you look back, like the Brat Pack, you got Pretty in Pink, Weird Science, Breakfast Club, St. Elmo's Fire, all those movies. A lot of the same actors, Molly Ringwald, Judd Nelson, Emilio Estevez, he likes to bring them back. And then when he evolved from teenager movies, he brought John Candy on a lot on the scene to do his more adult films, which I just always found interesting.
Yep, no, the one you haven't mentioned is Anthony Michael Hall.
Anthony Michael Hall,
He
that
appears
was
in
the
four of Hughes' movies. Yeah.
I agree. I like when directors do that. It's kind of like we were talking about the other night, when they find a good DP or cinematographer you can almost, they can communicate almost without communicating.
Yeah.
So I think that can happen with
Because we're all on the
directors
same
and actors.
level.
Yeah.
Yeah. It certainly cuts out a lot of the initial introduction and getting used to one another. There is a camaraderie probably and a mutual understanding as to what not only the director is looking for, what his expectation is, but also the director feeling that he's comfortable with the performer and their ability to deliver what he's looking for. Which makes it a heck of a lot easier when you're figuring that if you got to do like 1 or 2 takes rather than 10 or 15 takes in order to get the proper measure that you want on the screen.
Another funny thing is in Uncle Buck, Macaulay Culkin plays the little boy, and you then again see Hughes bring Macaulay Culkin back in the Home Alone movies.
Yep.
So I mean, he gets very attached to the certain actors that he really likes, and he always brings them back, which is something that I find awesome.
Yeah, and quite often here, these people that we're speaking about, Broderick has probably had the best career overall as far as being able to segue back to Broadway and still be in films. But their appearances in these movies have sometimes been the highlight of their careers, which is saying something for them, but also saying something for the credibility of Hughes's work.
They're never going to top Breakfast Club, ever. I mean, they'll never do anything in their careers that'll be as memorable as that.
Yeah.
Well, and weren't we saying the other day that Broderick is still cashing in on the Ferris Bueller image? There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
car
Yeah, he just did a commercial here recently.
Yeah, a couple years ago.
He's like
a car
50.
commercial.
Yeah, well, folks, I appreciate you coming here tonight. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. By all means, come again. Thank you.